Hello, this is Will Your Werewolf. I am continuing my stories. This one goes back to when I was in the army, and I'm just trying to show that I'm not the bad person that everyone thinks I am. I never caused this situation to happen. So, if you'd like to follow me and like me and comment on my stuff and press the bell button and subscribe and do all those things, that would be very welcome. But I'm just going to continue the story from my dim and distant past. The bar was dark, quiet and still. Nothing could be heard. The dust lay undisturbed at a table at the back, underneath a fan. Two men shared a joke about the normal folk. The levellers played over the jukebox in Mary Barry's bar in the village of Kilmore, Ireland. I was travelling to Ireland to meet the chief. I had caught the ferry over from Wales to Rosslare and made my way to meet in this village. The chief, my boss, always had a great sense of humour for our meets. The village of Kilmore. Yep, I got it. Kilmore. The barman was a grumpy fat fellow with a food-stained white Marks and Spencer's polo shirt. He was the stereotypical balding man, not accepting his loss gracefully, not grieving and letting it go. Not this man. He had grown the back and sides of his frugal fluff and scraped a handful of hairs across his pate. How can anyone look in the mirror and think that's okay? Just how could he? I mean, he was obviously worried about how he presented himself, but he just looked so ridiculous. Shave your shiny napper, you dick. Wash your shirt. Jogging bottoms, you're a barman. Really? Now, fat people, I didn't mean to offend anybody. Well, actually, fuck you. Fat people are thought to be stereotypically nice. He wasn't. He was actually actively unfriendly to his clientele. I think he thought he was clever. I find that is often the case with those that are truly stupid, though. They need to act clever, not realising clever people do not act clever because they are, well, clever. He was busy regaling me with some bullshit from his past. He had a need to impress me. He told me of his days as a battle-hardened hard man from a hard past when everything was really hard, particularly on a very hard day. The posit just sat there, he's my werewolf soul, looking at him with an open mouth of disbelief. The man told me how he was a gypsy bare-knuckle boxing champ, how he had once fought 6 men to a standstill in a tough man competition. You know, the usual things that the insecure make up to impress those they need to feel secure with. He told me of the boxing gypsies at Appleby Fair and all that, how he and his 6 brothers, sneezy, happy, grumpy, dopey, bullshit and waffle, had to get back to Ireland from England because of what happened with them and the Republican Army. He winked at the end of this explanation, leaning over towards me, giving me a horrendous whiff of his foul dog shit breath. Brush your teeth, you fancy foot. And then he did some kind of salute that I was supposed to recognise. He even showed me the scar where he had taken a bullet for his best friend, Fergus O'Dowd. The scar looked a lot like those that people get when they've had their appendix removed, but hey, I was no expert, so I was letting it continue, but I was getting very frustrated. Now, I was adequately bored and just wanted to enjoy a pint of stout and a whiskey chaser whilst waiting for the chief to arrive. I really wanted him to shut up and let me listen to the selections that I'd made on the jukebox, so I switched off from the man's pathetic patter and focused on my drinks while he continued his nonsense stories. "So, what do you think of that, son?" said the barkeep, spreading the dirt a little more evenly around the glass he was wiping with a dirty tea towel. I tried to refocus on what he just said and paused before delivering my answer. "I think that you are talking shite, you fat, out-of-shape, pathetic idiot who tries to impress people by talking crap across this bar and pretending that you are something that you are not." I smiled taking a mouthful of my drink as I sat back on the bar stool and then raised my hands in a sort of conciliatory manner with a huge grin. I saw him twitch. A micro expression of anger passed over his face, and then blissful silence from him at last. Thankfully, the only thing I could now hear was the excellent music from the jukebox. I fiddled with my empty shot glass and then looked at him. "I thought so," I said, lifting that glass and saluting him. "Full of shit. Another Macallan, please, your mouthiness." The guy stopped smearing the glass and, gently placing it down, made his way out to the back room. I ignored him and turned to look at the rest of the bar. I had an hour or so to kill, so wondered if there was anything that I could do to distract myself, and maybe anything to kill. Maybe I'd found my thing to kill. I wandered back over to the jukebox in the corner where I'd already made several selections. It was an old-fashioned vinyl juke 50 style and had, I must admit, a rather excellent collection of tunes. It had to be another person who chose those songs though, please, not the fat, flatulent fool. After a quarter of an hour or so, the bar door opened and in trooped 4 yokel locals, all working men. They had seriousness on their respective minds. These were the rednecks of Southern Ireland, and they had been called in to teach this stranger a lesson. Thank goodness, a distraction. The barman walked back behind the bar, leaning forward, and placed both palms down as a support and smiled. "This is the one, boys. He thinks he's some sort of hard man or something." The men laughed, and I turned back to the jukebox as though I was choosing my next tune. The largest, and because of his largeness, the leader of the men, stepped up behind me and mistakenly put his hand on my shoulder. I wouldn't do that if I was you, friend," I said. The men at the door laughed. "Oh, would you not? Why would that be then? You gonna beat all of us up, my friend," he replied. Pointedly, at the end of this sentence, he grasped harder to my shoulder and nodded to his friends to gain their general approval. I made my final selection, smiled, and spun to face him, cupping my hand under his chin and looking deep into his little piggy eyes. I gently lifted him off his feet. He was a huge guy, and this obviously impressed his buddies, who took an appropriate step back and an appropriate intake of breath. The man just dangled, his toes touching the ground, but only just. I didn't choke him. I just held him by his lower jaw. His entire weight was supported by my right arm, and he'd become quite immobile. I turned to his crew and smiled. "Right, you lot, sod off." No reaction from them was the reaction. This scenario did not compute in the little lumps of grey matter that sat in their skulls. They just stood there dumbfounded at the outcome of this brief moment. They now had slack jaws and dull eyes of confused prey, showing me that they were no longer a threat. "Now, you have a choice," I sighed. "You stay and you have to deal with me being annoyed with you, or you go and you get to tell the story of what happened in Maggie's bar that day. See him?" I raised the man in my hand off his toes and pointed at the man behind the bar. "He's dead, and he doesn't know it yet. And see this man," I lifted the big man higher still, "he's dead too, but you don't have to be. Just walk away. The local police will take at least 10 minutes to arrive. You will all be broken or dead by that time, and I will be gone. So quickly, make your decision." I looked each man squarely in the face with a smile before lowering the man back to his tiptoes. As the speech concluded, the bartender decided to make a break for it. I stopped him by throwing, the big man I had in my hand, at him. The big man hit the escaping barman, knocking them both to the floor. I followed the thrown man over the bar and onto them both with glee, hitting, kicking and punching quite gently. After a few strikes to quell the man's movements, I rose from behind the bar, just my torso showing. All the men could see was me and hear the moaning of the 2 downed men. I looked at the group at the door as I pointedly stamped down with my right foot. The crowd gathered, heard a distinct crunching sound, and then I looked at them and smiled. The barman has made a bit of a mess here. I'm sure this health authority would revoke any licence he pretends to have. The large man was now moving and moaning on the floor, so I dragged him up off the ground and laid him back on the bar, holding the scruff of his jacket while I looked at the other men at the door. You still here? Please, would you just leave? I looked down at the poor guy now. They just have no idea. I bet you are called Patrick, but spelt funny. If they don't go, I'm going to kill them too. I don't often give opportunities to people, but I cannot be bothered. I just came in for a pint and a shot to wait for someone. I do not need this right now. I grabbed his left ear and dragged it towards my mouth. I wish they would leave. I tore the ear off the screaming man and threw it to one side. Why are you still here? I asked them. And then they ran. About 2 minutes later, the chief entered the pub. I think the sight that met his eyes was maybe a bit disturbing for him. I had the large man sitting on the ground with his back to the bar. I sat in a seat near the jukebox listening to some good tunes. I was now having fun while having a sip of 3 from my pint. I was enjoying a good game of darts and was getting pretty accurate if the guy did not flinch too much. I pulled the darts from my target's forehead as the chief entered. It surprised me how tough the skull was. The darts were thrown with a lot of force and they'd not gone too deep. Hi, Chief. Want a game? His eyes swept the room as the sirens began to bleat in the distance. For fuck's sake, Will. For fuck's sake, what is it with you? Please like, please subscribe, please leave a comment. Love you. Bye from your werewolf.